So if you thought the Sony a6400 was going to be the only 6000 series camera that Sony are releasing this year, well, you're wrong. They're actually releasing two cameras this year on top of that. So you have the brand new Sony a6100, which we don't have on us today. However, we do have the bigger brother, the Sony a6600, and we're gonna have a look at what it's all about. So where does the Sony a6600 sit in the lineup of the Sony 6000 series? Now, the Sony a6500 was situated at their top of the line 6000 series and was more dedicated to video users, and this is where the 6600 will sit. Slightly above the 6500, the 6600 does have a strong focus in video, however still sports a large range of hardware and features that photographers would also benefit from. So let's go over the features of the Sony a6600. Just as a quick disclaimer before I go through the features of the Sony a6600, I only have one PowerPoint slide full of top level specs, so apologies in advance if I don't go too much into detail on the features of the camera. So first of all, it houses the same 24 megapixel Exmor APS-C CMOS sensor on the inside, which allows you to do some pretty nifty things in video as well as photo. So first, in video, it can record 4K video now in HDR. On the power specs, it can film up to 25 frames per second in 4K and 100 frames per second in Full HD. Assuming in NTSC, it'll be able to do up to 30 frames per second as well as up to 120 in Full HD. In terms of the ISO, its max ISO is 32,000 but can be expanded up to 102,400. One of the biggest improvements in the a6600 is the revamped autofocus system, now housing a 425 AF point system with a combination of phase and contrast detection points. Now, just like Sony's brand new line of cameras such as the a7R Mark IV and the RX100 Mark VII, the a6600 has animal and facial detection, eye autofocus and continuous eye autofocus both in photography and video modes. Lastly, the camera houses Wi-Fi and NFC, so you can quickly transfer your photos across to your smart device or use your smart device as a remote control. Next, I'm going to talk about the design of the Sony a6600 and compare it back to the previous Sony 6000 series bodies. So first of all, like the other Sony 6000 series bodies, the size of it is basically identical with the same shape. However, there is one big difference in the 6600, and that is the deeper grip. The grip is significantly larger and feels a lot more comfortable in your hands to use, especially for long-term usage. Now, this is because on the inside of that grip now houses a much bigger battery. So previously, all the Sony a6000 series from the 6000 up to the 6500 all used the MP-FW50 battery. Now, the a6600 uses the same Z series battery that is in the Sony a7 Mark III series and the a7R Mark IV. What this gives you now is a lot longer battery life, which is super exciting for people who are looking for that smaller form factor and looking for longer battery life performance. To top it off, it does have the same flip screen. It's a 180 flip screen like in the a6400, and an identical viewfinder as well. In terms of the button layer on the Sony a6600, it's basically identical to the rest of the 6000 series. However, it does have two extra custom buttons at the top just to give you that faster access to those settings that you really need. On the side of the camera, you have a nice clean door, which just does a quick little slide and opens up, and now adds a headphone port, which I know for a lot of Sony a6500 users, they 100% would have loved to have that in their camera. However, now you don't have to buy an external monitor or a dongle to get that extra headphone output. It's now inbuilt in the camera just below the mic port. In terms of other ports as well, it does have a micro HDMI port and a micro USB port. And finally, the Sony a6600 is constructed a little bit differently to the rest of the lineup. It is made out of a magnesium alloy construction, and you'll notice that the body does feel a lot more durable and doesn't have the shine that the other ones did with its different construction. In addition to that as well, the A6600 is now dust and moisture resistant, so it will last a bit better in those poorer weather conditions. Next, I'm going to go over the pros and cons of the Sony A6600, starting off with the pros. Firstly, as I mentioned, I really enjoy using the A6600 because of its deeper grip. It's a lot more comfortable and it will be more beneficial, especially if you're going to be shooting for long term. Now, adding this deeper grip and the brand new battery in the camera as well also increases the weight of the camera up to just over 500 grams. Therefore, making the camera a bit heavier, however still lightweight and well weighted. Now, one of my previous issues with the older 6000 cameras, such as the 6500 or the A6000 even, is that when you mount longer lenses or more front heavy lenses, it didn't feel as comfortable to use and was a bit of a pain to balance on a gimbal as well. So with the brand new extra added weight in the 6600, it's actually a lot more comfortable to use it with longer lenses as the weight is distributed a lot more evenly, which also makes it easier to balance on a gimbal without having to add extra weight to it. Secondly, the brand new battery is a welcome addition as those MP-FW50s did not last long at all. So now instead of having to carry around 5 batteries on your trip, maybe you only need to carry around 2, as each battery is rated to get you around 700 shots instead of the 300 shots in the previous battery. And lastly, having 4K HDR recording means you're going to get a lot more detail and dynamic range out of your 4K videos. I can see this as being a big plus for lovers of the Sony a6500 who really only use it for video and are looking to step up that 4K quality a bit more. The A6600 will complement for that. Now the cons of the A6600. Firstly, on the bottom of the camera, it still uses the same door for the battery and the SD card slot. Now I really enjoy cameras that have a separate SD card slot because it's just a lot easier to just chop and change instead of having to open the door at the bottom, basically turn off the camera and then chuck in a brand new SD card. The experience is just a lot more seamless when you have a separate door. Secondly, the record button is still in a really awkward spot on that right-hand side of the grip. Now, I would really appreciate if they moved that record button just slightly more inwards to the center of the camera or even just behind instead of where it is right now. And lastly, in terms of the ports on the camera, it still uses a micro USB port. As most devices now, as well as other cameras in the Sony range, are starting to move to USB-C, I would have loved to see that port implemented into this camera. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the camera out for a quick test for photography, and we're going to do some video samples as well, just to see whether the 6600 really steps it up. So before I take this out for a quick test, first things first, still has the same 5-axis image stabilization inbuilt on the sensor, so you're going to get some good stable performance throughout. And we're just going to test a couple of things as well. Firstly, the continuous eye autofocus in video, as well as the real-time tracking as well. So what I'm doing now is just testing the real-time tracking. And really, all you need to do to activate it is just touch the screen, and it'll automatically lock on and start tracking. So as you can see right now, this car's just pulled out and there's like a little square. And what it'll do is it'll track in real time wherever it moves. So you're always gonna get that shot. Today, our sample images and video was shot on the Sony a6600 and the Sony 35mm f2.8 Carl Zeiss lens. Now in terms of image quality, there really isn't too much difference between this one and the previous models, such as the a6500 or the 6400. Still boasts high image quality and the images look fantastic. In addition to that, the autofocus system is a welcome addition. You get faster response time, a lot better tracking performance, and having that continuous eye autofocus in photo really helps when you're trying to nail those portraits. In terms of video, the Sony a6600 still boasts a high level of flexibility and great video quality like in the rest of the 6000 series. Now with the addition of continuous eye autofocus, it makes it a lot easier to nail your video focusing. Furthermore, still keeping the same 5-axis image stabilization and the revamped autofocus system gives you a lot more opportunity to use the camera in full-time autofocus for video reliably. You still get the same flexible video options such as 4K up to 30, however now with the addition of HDR, it just gives you that bit of extra detail. With the Full HD, you can still film up to 120 frames per second, giving you some versatile slow motion options, and still with the inclusion of S-Log will give you a flatter color profile if you still want to tweak those colors in post-processing. My final thoughts on the Sony a6600. Now the price tag of it is about $2,200, which is not too far off from the a7 III. So why would you get this instead of their full frame a7 Mark III? First of all, if you enjoy the form factor, the line of E-mount lenses, and the 4K HDR, then the a6600 is a pretty good option, which saves you a bit of cash, and also a bit of weight in your bag as well. However, if you're looking to up your low light performance and possibly increase your photography performance as well, then the Sony a7 Mark III might be the better choice out of the two. If you have any questions on the Sony a6600, pop them in the comments below. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, as well as our blog, just to stay up to date with our latest events, as well as what's going on in store. And as always, if you enjoyed our video, hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our future updates as we upload videos weekly.